I wish you'd never been my mother." My daughter didn't whisper it. She didn't say it in anger behind closed doors. She said it loud enough for every person at the table to hear. For a second, the clinking of forks stopped. Conversations from nearby tables faded into the background. Even the waiter carrying a tray of wine glasses froze halfway between us and another booth. I looked at Emily. She was 36 years old, wearing the emerald green dress I'd helped her pick out a week earlier. Ryan sat beside her with one arm draped across the back of her chair, staring at me without saying a word. Not surprised, not embarrassed, almost satisfied. I folded my linen napkin and laid it beside my untouched slice of birthday cake. Then I stood. "If that's how you feel," I said quietly, "then live as if you never had one." Nobody moved. I picked up my purse, walked through the dining room and stepped into the warm June evening outside Cooper's Hawk Winery and Restaurant in Carmel, Indiana. The keys to the silver Mercedes SUV were already in my hand. I unlocked it, climbed inside, and drove away. Less than 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Bring my car back, or I'm calling the cops." I read the message while sitting at a red light on East 146th Street. Then I locked my phone. I never answered. Looking back now, people always ask me whether that was the moment everything changed. The truth is, everything had been changing for years. I just refused to see it. My name is Margaret Collins. Most people call me Maggie. I'm 61 years old, widowed, and until that birthday dinner I would have told you I had a wonderful family. Not perfect. No family is. But I honestly believed we loved one another enough to work through anything. Apparently, I was the only one who believed that. My husband, Tom, died 8 years earlier after a short fight with pancreatic cancer. 40 years together. He used to joke that I balanced every checkbook in Hamilton County before online banking made it easy. I spent nearly 3 decades working my way up from a teller to vice president at a regional bank in Indianapolis before retiring. Numbers always made sense to me. People, not nearly as much. Especially when those people were your own children. After Tom passed away, Emily became my whole world. I'd tell myself she still needed me. Maybe she did. Or maybe I needed to believe someone still did. By the time she married Ryan, I'd already helped pay off her student loans. When they struggled to buy a home after Lily was born, I stepped in again. When Emily's old SUV broke down on Interstate 465 during a snowstorm with my granddaughter in the back seat, I bought her the Mercedes. She cried when I handed her the keys. "I'll pay you back, Mom," I smiled. "There'll be plenty of time for that." Funny how those words kept coming back. There'll be plenty of time. There never was. The birthday dinner had started beautifully. Emily had invited 15 people. Ryan's parents, my younger sister, Carol, 2 cousins, a few close friends. Even Lily, my sweet 8-year-old granddaughter, sat beside me coloring on the kids' menu until her chicken tenders arrived. For the first hour, everything felt normal. We laughed about old family vacations. Ryan ordered another bottle of wine. The waiter brought out appetizers. Emily hugged me after opening the pearl earrings I'd bought her. "I love them," she said, and I believed her. Then Ryan started making jokes. "So, Maggie," he said with a grin, "have you decided which one of us gets the lake house someday?" A few people chuckled politely. I smiled without answering. "It isn't really dinner conversation." Ryan shrugged dramatically. "I'm just saying, estate planning saves everybody headaches." Emily laughed. "So true." I changed the subject. I asked Lily about her softball season. She proudly told everyone she'd hit her first double. The conversation moved on, or so I thought. 20 minutes later, Ryan leaned toward me again. "You know," he said, swirling his wine, "if you helped us refinance now, we'd probably save enough interest to finally redo the kitchen." Emily nodded. "It would make things easier." "I've already helped quite a bit," I said gently. Ryan smiled. "You've always said family helps family." "I have." "So, what's one more signature?" I looked at him. "No." I didn't raise my voice. I simply said no, Ryan leaned back in his chair. The smile disappeared. Emily stared at me. What do you mean, no? I mean exactly that. She crossed her arms. You know we'd never ask unless we needed it. I know. So why won't you help? Because sometimes helping isn't actually helping. Ryan let out a quiet laugh. There it is. Emily looked confused. There what is? The control. I blinked. I'm sorry? Ryan shook his head. Everything always comes with strings. I turned toward Emily. I've never asked for anything in return. Ryan spoke before she could answer. Except gratitude. The table fell silent. Emily suddenly pushed her chair back a few inches. You know what? She said, her voice shaking. I'm tired of this. Emily. No, Mom. I'm tired of feeling like you get to decide everything because you have the money. You always have. People around us shifted uncomfortably. Carol quietly reached for her water glass. Ryan didn't say another word. He didn't have to. Emily was doing all the talking now. Then she looked directly at me. I wish you'd never been my mother. Nobody breathed. Not even Lily. I can still see my granddaughter's little face, turning from her mother to me, completely confused. That's the part I remember most, not Emily's words, Lily's eyes. I stood, spoke my one sentence, walked away. When I reached my house 20 minutes later, I sat in the Mercedes with the engine off. The silence was unbearable. Then I started crying. Not because my daughter had insulted me, because somewhere deep inside, I realized she believed every word she'd said. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if I'd spent years teaching her that my love would always cost me everything. And her nothing. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Emily's voice again. I wish you'd never been my mother. It wasn't just what she said. It was how easily she said it. Like those words had been sitting inside her for a long time, waiting for an excuse to come out. Around 6 the next morning, my knees reminded me I wasn't 20 anymore. The familiar ache started before my feet even touched the floor. My orthopedic doctor had been urging me to schedule knee replacement surgery for almost a year. I'd postponed it 3 times. There was always a reason. Emily needed help with Lily. Ryan was between jobs. The house needed repairs. Someone always seemed to need me more than I needed myself. I made coffee, carried my mug onto the back porch, and watched the neighborhood wake up. Normally, Saturdays meant Lily would be running across my yard before lunch. She loved feeding the birds with me. That morning, the yard stayed empty. I checked my phone. Nothing, no apology, no explanation, just silence. I told myself to leave it alone. Instead, I opened the photo album on my phone. There was Lily at 6, covered in flour after we tried making Christmas cookies. There she was holding up a blue ribbon from her school science fair. Then a picture of all 3 of us from the Indianapolis Zoo. Emily was smiling in that one. A real smile. Looking at those pictures made me wonder where we'd gone wrong. Or maybe the better question was when. The truth is, none of this started at that birthday dinner. It happened one favor at a time. After Tom died, I threw myself into helping Emily. It made me feel useful. The first few times, it truly was an emergency. Her student loans, unexpected medical bills after Lily was born, Ryan getting laid off for 6 months. Those were things any parent might help with if they could. Then the emergencies became habits. One afternoon about 5 years earlier, Emily had called me crying. I don't know what we're going to do. What happened? We're 2 months behind on the mortgage. I remember sitting in my office staring at the computer screen. How much? When she told me I transferred the money before we even hung up, she hugged me that weekend. We'll pay you back. I believed her. Months later, another problem came along, then another. It was never extravagant things, always something that sounded reasonable. A leaking roof, a broken furnace. Lily needed braces. Ryan's truck transmission failed. Each story made sense by itself. Looking back, that's how it happened. Not one huge mistake, hundreds of little ones. The Mercedes had been different. That wasn't because Emily asked. She never did. 3 winters earlier, she spun off Interstate 465 during an ice storm. She wasn't hurt, thank God, but she called me shaking so badly she could barely speak. Lily was crying, Mom. I know, sweetheart. Are you okay? I don't think this SUV is safe anymore. The next weekend, I took her to the Mercedes dealership in Indianapolis. She argued with me. Mom, this is too much. It isn't if it keeps my granddaughter safe. She cried when I handed her the keys. Ryan hugged me harder than Emily did. Now I wondered whether he'd been thanking me, or calculating what else he could eventually get. Late Monday morning, I received a text. Not from Emily, from Lily. It was only 6 words. I miss you, Grandma, love you. A few seconds later, another message appeared. It disappeared almost immediately. Someone had unsent it. My stomach tightened. Had Emily taken the phone away, or Ryan? I stared at the screen for several minutes before putting the phone down. That hurt more than the birthday dinner. Adults can survive ugly words. Children shouldn't have to live inside them. By Wednesday afternoon, I found myself sitting across from Susan Keller. Susan had handled Tom's will years earlier. She'd also helped me create my family trust after I retired from the bank. She'd known me long enough to tell when I was pretending to be stronger than I felt. You've been crying, she said quietly. I gave a tired smile. I'm not hiding it very well. No. She slid a box of tissues across her desk. What happened? I told her everything, the birthday, the Mercedes, the text message, the silence afterward. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she opened a thick file cabinet behind her desk. I want to show you something. Several folders landed gently on the conference table. Property records, insurance documents, closing paperwork from 8 years earlier. She pointed to one page. Do you remember buying Emily's house? I nodded. They couldn't qualify for the mortgage after Ryan's credit problems. You paid cash. Yes. Susan adjusted her glasses. And do you remember my advice? Bits and pieces came back. Emily had been 8 months pregnant with Lily. She'd been exhausted after signing what felt like 50 different documents. Susan had suggested placing the home inside my family trust until Ryan's financial history was further behind him. It protected the property while giving Emily and her family complete use of the home. At the time, everyone agreed, including Emily. Susan looked directly at me. You never promised to give her that house. No. You promised she'd always have a place to live. There was a difference. One I'd stopped seeing years ago. Susan folded her hands. Maggie, are you asking me how to punish your daughter? I shook my head immediately. No. Then what are you asking? The answer surprised even me. I think I'm asking how to stop disappearing. Susan smiled sadly. That's a much healthier question. For the first time since the birthday dinner, I didn't feel angry. I felt something much harder. I realized I'd spent years protecting my daughter from the consequences of her choices. And in doing that, I may have helped create the woman who believed I owed her everything. I carried Susan's folder home and left it on my kitchen table. For 2 days, I walked past it without opening it again. Every time I looked at those papers, I heard Emily's voice from the restaurant. I wish you'd never been my mother. Then I heard another voice, Lily's. I miss you, Grandma. That little text message stayed on my phone. I must have read it 50 times. By Friday morning, I still hadn't signed anything. I made oatmeal I didn't eat. The coffee went cold beside me. I even picked up the phone twice to call Susan and tell her to forget everything. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Emily would cool off. Maybe she'd call. Maybe we'd work it out. I was still arguing with myself when my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello? There was a long pause. Then I heard a tiny whisper. Grandma? Lily? I only have a minute. My heart immediately started pounding. Sweetheart, are you okay? Yeah. Another pause. I miss feeding the birds. I closed my eyes. I miss you too. She lowered her voice even more. Mommy says we aren't coming over anymore. I swallowed hard. Did Mommy tell you why? No. Silence. Then she said something that still breaks my heart. She says you're selfish now. I couldn't speak. Not because I was angry, because an 8-year-old little girl was trying to make sense of an adult fight she never asked to be part of. Lily, I finally managed, I love you very much. I love you too. I'll always love you. I know. Another voice echoed somewhere in the background. Lily? She gasped. I gotta go. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone until the screen turned black. That was the moment something changed inside me. Not because Emily had insulted me, not because of the Mercedes, because I realized my granddaughter was already being taught a story about me that wasn't true. I picked up my purse. This time, I drove straight to Susan's office. She looked up when I walked in. I had a feeling I'd see you today. I sat across from her. I'm ready. She didn't smile. She simply nodded. You understand what comes next? I do. Susan slid one final document toward me. This authorizes recovery of property you still legally own. I signed. Then I looked at her. I don't want anyone embarrassed. I know. I don't want shouting. I know. I especially don't want Lily frightened. We'll handle it professionally. She closed the folder. I've already scheduled licensed movers for Monday morning. Everything suddenly felt real. Monday arrived hotter than usual. By 9 o'clock, I found myself sitting in my own driveway, unable to stop checking the time. I wasn't going to Emily's house. Susan had advised against it. There'll be enough emotions already, she'd said. You don't need to stand in the middle of them. Still, waiting was almost worse. At 9:17, Susan texted, movers have arrived. At 9:31, police have been called. Everything remains calm. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. At 9:46, my phone rang. Susan, you can relax. I don't feel very relaxed. I know. What happened? The moving company began loading the furniture exactly as planned. I closed my eyes. My dining room? Yes. The leather sectional? Yes. The bedroom set Tom and I bought before Emily got married? That too. Everything had been documented years earlier. Every receipt, every photograph, every insurance rider. I hadn't kept those records because I expected to use them against my daughter. I'd kept them because I'd spent 30 years in banking. Old habits die hard, Susan continued. Ryan demanded the movers stop. I'm guessing they didn't. They asked him to speak with me. I could almost picture it. Ryan standing in the driveway, trying to charm everyone. Then trying to intimidate them when charm failed. And the police? They reviewed the paperwork. What did they say? Susan chuckled softly. Exactly what I expected. She cleared her throat. This appears to be a civil matter. Ownership of the listed property has been documented. No one was arrested, no dramatic handcuffs, just facts. Sometimes facts hit harder than anger. Around noon, my neighbor, Diane, called. I hope you don't mind me asking. Asking what? I was driving past Emily's neighborhood after my dentist appointment. I knew what she was going to say. I saw the moving truck. So did everyone else. I almost called you. You just did. She hesitated. I've known you 20 years, Maggie. Yes. You must have had a very good reason. That sentence caught me off guard. She hadn't judged me. She hadn't asked what I'd done wrong. She assumed I hadn't reached this point lightly. I did, I said quietly. I figured. That afternoon, another text appeared from Emily. This one was much longer. How could you humiliate us like this? Lily was crying. Ryan says you've lost your mind. If Dad were alive, he'd be ashamed of you. I read every word. Then I looked at the framed photograph of Tom sitting on the bookshelf. He was smiling, fishing pole in one hand, coffee mug in the other. I knew exactly what he would have said. Enough is enough, Maggie. I set the phone down without replying. An hour later, Susan called again. I found something you need to see. What is it? It isn't about the furniture. Her voice had changed, more serious. Several months ago, Ryan applied for a home equity loan using Emily's address. I frowned. So? He listed himself as the owner. My stomach tightened. Was he? No. The bank denied the application because the property belongs to your trust. I gripped the edge of my chair. For the first time, I stopped thinking this was simply about an ungrateful daughter. Someone had been trying to take control of property that never belonged to him. And suddenly, the birthday dinner looked a lot less spontaneous than I'd believed. For 2 days after Susan told me about the failed home equity loan, I couldn't think about anything else. Ryan hadn't just assumed the house would someday belong to him. He'd already tried to borrow against it, without telling me, without even telling the bank the truth. The more I replayed every conversation we'd had over the last few years, the more little things started making sense. His sudden interest in my retirement accounts, the questions about my will, the jokes about planning ahead. None of them had been jokes. They'd been fishing expeditions. Susan called Thursday morning. I have something else, I sighed. I'm almost afraid to ask. You remember the occupancy agreement Emily signed before Lily was born? Of course. I sent Ryan's attorney a copy after the moving company finished. And? He responded. I waited. He requested mediation before we move forward with terminating their right to occupy the property. I wasn't surprised. Going before a judge would expose too much. Did he say why? Susan hesitated. He claims Emily had no idea the house wasn't legally hers. That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because I believed it. Emily had signed stacks of paperwork 8 years ago while she was exhausted, swollen, and counting down the days until Lily arrived. She trusted me. She trusted Susan. Most of all, she trusted Ryan to understand the financial details. Maybe she never looked at another document after that day. Maybe she honestly believed she'd been living in a house that already belonged to her. For the first time since the birthday dinner, I wondered just how much Ryan had kept from her. Saturday afternoon, my sister Carol came over with sandwiches from a little deli we'd loved since high school. She set the bag on my kitchen counter and looked around. The house feels too quiet. I've noticed. She poured us each a glass of iced tea before sitting across from me. You still haven't heard from Emily? Not directly. I handed her my phone. She read Emily's last message slowly. Ryan says you've lost your mind. Carol frowned. Does anything about that sound like Emily? I didn't answer right away. When Emily was younger, she'd always chosen her words carefully. Even when she was upset, she'd pause before speaking. Ryan was different. He spoke first and thought later. Carol leaned forward. Do you remember Thanksgiving 3 years ago? I nodded. Ryan had insisted everyone refinance their mortgages because debt was good if you used it right. He'd talked over everyone at the table like he was giving a seminar instead of eating turkey. Tom would have hated that conversation. Carol continued. I watched him answer questions for Emily all afternoon. I looked up. What do you mean? When people asked her something, he answered before she could. I thought back. He did. I'd noticed it then but brushed it aside. Newly married couples sometimes developed odd habits, except they weren't newly married anymore. The following Tuesday, Susan invited me to her office. When I arrived, a thin folder sat in front of my chair. I think you should see these. She opened it. Inside were printed screenshots, group messages. The sender's name was Ryan. Where did these come from? Emily's college friend, Melissa. I recognized the name immediately. Melissa had been Emily's roommate at Purdue. The screenshots weren't dramatic, they were worse. One message read, "She's too soft. If I push hard enough, she'll ask her mom again." Another, "Maggie always caves. She hates disappointing Emily." Then one from 6 months earlier. "Once the house is finally ours, we can use the equity to wipe out everything." I felt sick. There was one final message. The date matched the week before Emily's birthday dinner. If she says no again, Emily needs to stop letting her guilt trip us. I stared at the screen. There it was. The argument hadn't exploded by accident. Ryan had been preparing for it. Maybe not every word, maybe not the exact outcome, but he had been pushing Emily toward a confrontation. Susan quietly closed the folder. I've authenticated the messages with Melissa's written statement. I rubbed my temples. I don't even know how to feel. You don't have to decide today. That evening, I sat on my back porch, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. The birds Lily loved were hopping around the feeder again. Without thinking, I scattered a little extra seed. Old habits. I smiled despite myself. Then my phone buzzed. Emily. For a long second, I couldn't bring myself to answer. Finally, I picked up. Hello? Silence. Then a shaky voice. Ugh, Mom? I hadn't heard her cry since Tom's funeral. I just found out, she whispered. I closed my eyes. What did you find out? Ryan never told me about the loan. I didn't say anything. He said the bank made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. I know. She started crying harder. I found the denial letter in his desk. There was another long pause. And she struggled to get the words out. He opened a credit card in his own name and used it to pay off gambling debts. That caught me completely off guard. Gambling? I didn't know. She sounded utterly exhausted. I swear to you, Mom, I didn't know. For the first time since that terrible birthday dinner, I heard something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not entitlement, just confusion. The kind that comes when the life you've believed in starts falling apart one piece at a time. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay. I wanted to drive to her house, hug her, and pretend none of this had happened. Instead, I remembered what Susan had said. Sometimes protecting someone from consequences only delays the pain. So I spoke as gently as I could. Emily. Yes? I love you. She broke down, sobbing. But this time, I can't fix it for you. She didn't argue. She didn't hang up. She just cried quietly, while neither of us knew what the future would look like. When we finally ended the call, I realized something important. For the first time in years, Ryan wasn't speaking for my daughter anymore. The mediation was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Susan warned me it wouldn't look anything like the courtroom dramas people watched on television. No judge, she said as we walked into the conference room. No jury, just both sides, their attorneys, and a neutral mediator. That sounded fine with me. I wasn't looking for a spectacle. I just wanted the truth to stop hiding. The conference room overlooked downtown Carmel. A long walnut table filled the center, with leather chairs arranged neatly around it. A pot of coffee sat untouched in one corner. Ryan and Emily were already there when Susan and I walked in. Ryan looked tired, but not defeated. His expensive navy suit was perfectly pressed, and he still wore the confident smile I'd seen so many times before. Emily looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were swollen. She didn't look at me. The mediator, a gray-haired attorney named Charles Benton, greeted everyone politely before explaining the rules. Today isn't about punishment, he said. It's about resolving the legal issues before they become a lawsuit. I nodded. Ryan leaned back comfortably. As long as everybody's reasonable. Susan didn't respond. She simply opened 2 thick binders and placed them on the table. I recognized them immediately. One held the trust documents. The other contained everything else. Years of receipts, insurance records, bank transfers, property inventories, photographs. Every piece of paper I'd saved simply because I'd spent most of my career believing documentation mattered. Today, it did. Charles invited Ryan's attorney to begin. A younger man named Eric smiled politely. My clients believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding ownership of the residence. Susan slid one document across the table. There isn't. Charles examined it carefully. The trust agreement, executed 8 years earlier, recorded with the county, perfectly valid. Ryan cleared his throat. Emily has lived there for almost a decade. Susan nodded. Yes. We've maintained it. Yes. We've treated it as our home. Also, yes. Ryan spread his hands. So how can she suddenly lose it? Susan's answer was calm. Occupancy and ownership are not the same thing. Silence settled over the room. Charles turned another page, then another. No one spoke. Finally, he looked toward Ryan. This agreement is very clear. Ryan shifted in his chair for the first time. His confidence faded just a little. He tried another approach. Fine. He pointed toward me. But she promised Emily that house. I looked directly at him. I promised my daughter she would always have a safe place to raise Lily. I paused. I never promised anyone ownership without responsibility. Emily finally lifted her eyes. Just for a second. Then she looked back down. Susan opened the second binder. There's another issue. She placed several documents in front of Charles. The attempted home equity loan. Ryan immediately spoke. That was exploratory. Susan ignored him. The application identifies Mr. Walker as the property's owner. Charles compared the application with the trust records. They don't match. No, Susan replied. They do not. Ryan's attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. Ryan's jaw tightened. Then Susan placed another stack of papers on the table. The printed text messages. Melissa's sworn statement. Charles read silently for several minutes. No one interrupted him. The room felt impossibly quiet. Finally, he looked at Ryan. Did you write these messages? Ryan didn't answer. His attorney quietly placed a hand on his arm. You don't have to respond. Charles nodded. Understood. But the silence said enough. Susan turned one final page. The messages describe a plan to pressure Mrs. Collins into transferring property, Ryan finally snapped. Oh, come on. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. Everybody asks family for help. This wasn't help, Susan replied evenly. It was manipulation, Ryan pointed at me. She controlled Emily for years. Before I could answer, someone else did. No, every head turned. Emily was standing. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. No, she repeated. Ryan stared at her. Emily, you told me Mom was hiding things. I was protecting us. You told me the house was basically ours already. It should have been. You told me she only said no because she wanted us begging. Ryan took one step toward her. Don't do this. She stepped back instead. I found the loan papers. He froze. I found the gambling statements. No one moved. Emily reached into her purse and placed a small envelope on the table. I also found this. Ryan's face lost what little color remained. Charles opened the envelope. Inside were several Casino Players Club statements. Thousands of dollars. Repeated visits over many months. The room became so quiet I could hear the air conditioner humming overhead. Ryan looked around desperately. You don't understand. Emily shook her head. No, a tear rolled down her cheek. I finally do. She turned toward me. For the first time since my birthday dinner, she met my eyes without anger. I'm so sorry, Mom. I felt every emotion I'd been carrying for weeks rise all at once. Relief, heartbreak, love, grief. I wanted to walk over and hug her. Instead, I stayed where I was. Because this moment wasn't about rescuing her. It was about letting her stand on her own. Charles closed the file. I believe today's mediation has answered the central legal questions. Ryan's attorney quietly leaned over. We should discuss settlement. Ryan looked around the room one last time. No one was standing beside him anymore. Not his lawyer, not Emily, not even the story he'd spent years building. As Susan gathered our documents, she leaned toward me and spoke softly enough that only I could hear. You did the hardest thing a parent can do. I looked through the conference room window at the bright Indiana afternoon. What was that? She smiled gently. You finally stopped confusing love with surrender. For the first time in weeks, I believed my family still had a chance. It just wasn't going to be the family Ryan had tried to create. It took almost 11 months before Emily and I sat across from each other again. Not in a lawyer's office, not at a mediation table, just a quiet little cafe in downtown Noblesville where we'd eaten breakfast years before Lily was born. I arrived early. Old habit. I ordered coffee and watched people hurry past the windows. When the bell above the front door chimed, I looked up. Emily stood there holding her purse with both hands. She looked thinner, not unhealthy, just lighter somehow, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy load for a long time and had finally put it down. She walked over slowly. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." Neither of us knew whether to hug. After a slightly awkward second, she stepped forward. So did I. We held each other for a long moment. When we finally sat down, neither of us spoke right away. Then Emily smiled weakly. "I've practiced this conversation about 100 times." "So have I," she laughed through tears. "I figured." The waitress brought our coffee, and after she walked away, Emily reached into her purse. "I wrote something." She handed me an envelope. I wasn't sure I'd be able to say it. Inside was a handwritten letter, 6 pages. I read every word while she stared out the window. She admitted she'd ignored warning signs because believing Ryan was easier than questioning the man she'd married. She apologized for letting him speak for her. She admitted she'd started expecting my help instead of appreciating it. One sentence made me stop reading for a moment. "I kept thinking you were taking things away from me. I never realized how much you'd already given." By the time I reached the last page, my eyes were full of tears. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. "You didn't owe me this." "I did." "No," I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You owed yourself the truth." She nodded quietly. Life looked very different now. Ryan had agreed to a divorce rather than fight over debts that were clearly his own. The mediation documents and financial records had left very little room for argument. Emily moved into a modest 2-bedroom townhouse a few miles from Lily's school. It wasn't fancy. The furniture didn't match. She'd found most of it at estate sales and local thrift stores. When she proudly showed me the place for the first time, she smiled. "I paid for every piece myself." "I can tell," she laughed nervously. "Is that a compliment?" "It absolutely is." For the first time since she was a young woman, she wasn't building a life with someone else's money. She was building it herself. The house remained exactly where it had always belonged, inside the Collins family trust. Not because I wanted control, because I'd finally learned that protecting something for the next generation sometimes meant saying no to the current one. Emily understood that now. One Saturday afternoon, while Lily and I planted tomatoes in my backyard, Emily walked over carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "I've been thinking." "That can be dangerous," I teased. She rolled her eyes exactly the way she used to when she was 16. "I deserve that." She handed me a glass. "When the trust eventually passes someday," I interrupted her, "someday is hopefully a very long time away." She smiled. "I know." Then she surprised me. "I don't want you changing anything." I looked at her. "The trust?" She nodded. "Leave it exactly the way it is." I searched her face. "You mean that?" "I do." She watched Lily laughing as dirt covered her gardening gloves. "I'd rather Lily inherit stability than expectations." I don't think she'd ever said anything that made me prouder. The Mercedes was another story. A few months after the divorce was finalized, Emily drove it into my driveway. She climbed out and handed me the keys. "I can't keep this." "You don't have to give it back." "I know," she smiled, "but I want to." We sold it together the following week. Neither of us wanted the reminder. After taxes and fees, there was still enough money left to start something new. Susan helped us create a college investment account for Lily. Both Emily and I contributed, not equally, together. That difference mattered. One cool October evening, Lily and I sat on the back porch feeding the birds again, just like we used to. She leaned against my shoulder. "Grandma, yes? Are you and Mommy okay now?" I smiled. "We're getting there." She thought about that. "Sometimes Mommy cries." "I know, but she smiles more." I looked toward the garden where Emily was picking tomatoes we'd planted together. "So do I." Lily slipped her small hand into mine. "I'm glad." Children don't need perfect families. They need honest ones. That may have been the biggest lesson any of us learned. Looking back, people still ask if I regret standing up from that birthday table. I always give the same answer. I regret waiting so long. Love isn't measured by how much you're willing to give away. Sometimes it's measured by the courage to finally draw a healthy boundary, and trusting the people you love to grow because of it. If this fictional story reminded you of someone who's had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting their self-respect, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy grounded family dramas with hopeful endings, thank you for reading and following along.